Hello, everybody. That is a little too hot. Welcome to my channel. My name is Margaret Pennard. I'm a historical fiction and fantasy author, and it's Wednesday, so it's wrap-up time. Time for me to get into some fun book reviews. So lately, I've been taking 2 weeks to get around to wrap-ups so that I have a little bit more to cover, and the videos go a little longer. Hopefully that works for everybody. But this time I've caught 6 books to cover, to review, to catch all, and unfortunately, or fortunately, I have a lot to say about several of them. So this may go a little long. Feel free to watch in installments. Totally fine. Totally fine. Before we start with our 6 books that I've read in the past couple weeks, I just wanted to let you know upcoming events before I forget, which can often happen. So on Friday, I'm doing our fireside chat with Sheraton Mortis and R.C. Scott. They are fellow writers, and it's Friday the 13th, so I wanted to call on some horror writers who knew what they were talking about. So we'll be doing some flash fiction, some chat, some fun, easygoing chat about horror. So I'm sure Cat's Novel Adventures will want to be there. Anyway, so that's our Friday the 13th special fireside chat. Then I will be hosting karaoke Saturday with Barrett Laurie. And then Sunday, it's going to be another big omnibus because I'm going to be making recommendations for the November readathons to give some of you time to process that there are these opportunities. You can plan to get the book from the library and have plenty of time to dive in for November. So, busy week. I just wanted to reiterate in case people were excited about any of those things. That is when they are happening. And now I'll just say hello to the chat. Mama Maggie Ward, I think the most famous stream hopper ever. So I said hello. Emma Bennett says, watcha. She says, watcha. So I happened into her chat, which is going on right now. And I said, pop it. Just popped out, I guess. Nita A.F. Stewart says, hello. And Felicia, Dreaming Truth author, hello. And Paget Farmer, another stream hopper who booped the like button. Thank you. So, hello chat. I've got a little question of the day for you, which is this. So I'll just leave this up for the first little bit as we're saying hello. So, have you made any fall treats yet? That is my fun theme for today's book reviews. For some reason, I know what the reason is. The season shifted in the past couple weeks. So we had our final heat gasp, and that will come up in another book soon. But I shifted and I went, I don't want salads and toasties anymore. I need a hearty soul food. So I roasted chickpeas and I made some viral date bark. Apparently, that's a TikTok recipe, and some chocolate shortbread and lots of good stuff. So anyway, fall treats. Anybody? Yeah. Oh, look, I just said his name and we conjured him into the chat. Hello, RC. I don't think Sheraton will show up the same, but hello. That means the notifications must be working. Maggie's got an answer. I made apple caramel popovers. That sounds lovely. They lasted half a day. I only got one. Ugh. Well, that is not how it works in my household. I do have a plan to get rid of some of my chocolate shortbread, though. I need cat sitters soon, so that may be where it gets doled out. Okay, onward, everybody. We're going to talk first about, I told you there would be a heat discussion. The Heat Will Kill You First, Life and Death on a Scorched Planet by Jeff Goodell. And as you can see, this is a library book. We've got the, Mylar plastic. We've got the barcode. We've got the Lucky Day sticker because this is a new release that came out in July, so only 3 months old. And new releases get these little stickers, and you only get to check them out once at the library. So I nabbed this. Not sure if I heard about it before, but when I saw it on the library shelf, I said, ooh, climate nonfiction book. This should be good. So I checked it out, and it starts out close to home. He dives right into, like, as a reporter, he dives right into human interest stories, and it turned out to be the Pacific Northwest human interest story, where people died, and I was here for some of the time, and so right away I was like, oh, Pacific Northwest, heat, okay. And then he goes into California and the Valley and like hikers dying, and I was like, oh, yeah, I have a friend who lives there. I used to go there every summer. Like, that's hot, okay. And he just goes into story after story of ordinary people grappling with the change in heat. He grounds us with facts in between. He tries to express things about our perception of heat and risk that makes it such a dangerous thing as we venture into the next stage in the climate catastrophe. So I found this really good. This is a 5-star book. And I don't know if this is going to help anybody in describing this, but when I was in grad school, I had a climate policy class with someone named Dr. Scott Barrett. And he had a really good structure for the class, which is that he built every week on a different set of readings that looked at the climate crisis from a different angle. So first it was science, and then it was stats, and then it was, regional resources, and then it was agreements, like policy agreements, treaties, and then finally we worked into the politics. So you sort of build on facts into perceptions, and I really liked that. I really enjoyed that presentation and how we got to learn about climate policy. So Jeff Goodell, reporter, and this is like the areas that he covers. Obviously, there's many dangers from climate change. Heat, drought, flood, hurricane, sea level rise, sea acidification, all sorts of fun dangers. And so he's tackling one, which is heat itself. What is it? And so the areas he covers are as follows. The Goldilocks zone, the evolutionary view of how we evolved as a species over 100,000 years or so to exist in a certain temperature range. The evolutionary body that we have that does certain things really well because of that Goldilocks zone, but also the animals have, and like some of those things we share and some of those things we don't. And it was really kind of neat to hear about an animal example, because I think we often leave wildlife out of our climate considerations. He talks about heat islands, and he takes both an American example, Phoenix, Arizona, which I think a lot of people will think of heat when they hear, but also Chennai in India, and looking at the human cost to the rising heat. And that was really affecting. He talks about heat refugees, again, both people driving out of Texas after the last super heat wave, and animals. Where are the animals fleeing? What are they creating as they flee? And the rise in miles that they're covering based on abilities, how fast they can move, which was a really cool statistic I hadn't heard, that all of these species are migrating at a jacked up rate, obviously. Attributive modeling. So he opens up one chapter by talking to a climate scientist in London who's on her bicycle going to work, thinking about different things in London. And that's called crime scene. And what I mean by attributive modeling is that they are beginning to be able to, in the last 2 years, this is a really up-to-date current book, right? They are beginning to be able to model variations in climate and how much is due to climate change, warming, human CO2 added, methane added, all that stuff. And so basically they're calling it crime scene because they're predicting that pretty soon they will be able to sue corporations for the amount they have put in the atmosphere and hold them liable for the amount of damage that has done in climate damage. And that blew my mind. And, he's talking to this scientist and all these things that have been peer reviewed and where the science is versus 20 years ago. And like my brain is sort of still computing it. So that was really cool. Talks about ocean heat. He talks about heat domes, atmospheric rivers. And of course, I've heard that living on the West Coast because we have a thing with atmospheric rivers and weird weather here. But I understood more of what they mean. It's heat coming off of the ocean because the upper ocean is much more heated than normal. And how normally we have certain atmospheric rivers that we don't notice, but they're fracturing. And it's kind of like if you had a fan belt that always goes around the same thing, all of a sudden it slips off. That is what we get when we get all this like monsoon in California out of season. So that was really cool, explaining things in a really accessible way. He talks about inequality and he calls that the sweat economy. And I have definitely seen this in action and felt the differences of being someone who works in an air-conditioned space or a cool space indoors and watching people who are houseless, who are working outdoors, who are working in non-air-conditioned spaces. And he draws particular attention to agricultural workers and warehouse workers and delivery workers and the rash of people who have died in those situations. And the fact that there's no OSHA guidelines in some places, as well as FEMA response for heat. And you're like, really? No, there's no FEMA crisis for heat. So, I know I'm getting really into the weeds with this one, but the areas he covers are just so fascinating, as well as roofers. I mean, yeah, who wants to be on a roof in the heat? And then finally, he talks about ice, both in Antarctica, where there are penguins in the south, and the ice sheet that he calls the doomsday shelf or sheet, as well as the Arctic ice of the North Pole that has polar bears that are already on their way to extinction because of what we've done to the atmosphere. And then we've got vectors. So as I said, animals migrating means they are vectors for disease, specifically mosquitoes, which hate me, or I should say love me and I hate them, bats, and I didn't know about all the stuff bats do. I thought they just ate mosquitoes, and ticks. And so that was the least pleasant chapter for me to read because I feel particularly vulnerable to biting insects. And of course, humans are particularly vulnerable to biting insects. And that was scary. And then finally, we get cheap cold air, which is air conditioning, technology vulnerability, and that sort of revolution and how we've become dependent on it, but how it can go like that. So, oh my gosh, I've rattled on for like minutes about this, but really good book. I really recommend it to anyone who wants a organized, layered view of what just one effect of the climate crisis is doing to us in like cascading effects. Very organized, very accessible, gets into inequality issues. He calls it temperature apartheid, which I liked. See if there's anything else I missed. Oh, harrowing. Oh, and one of the final chapters, I'll just say, he goes in to talk about Paris. So we get London with the scientists, and then we get Paris with the adaptation. So one of the things that we covered was climate mitigation in my class in grad school and climate adaptation. And mitigation means like, what are we doing to slow down making it worse, putting out more carbon? And adaptation means what are we doing to adapt to whatever effects will already be happening? And so we still need to do both, but we've like altered the picture in the 10 years since I've been in grad school. And so he talks about geoengineering and also the specific weird case that Paris is in and a lot of cities are in, but Paris is his example, and that hits close to home because I love Paris. I haven't been there since 2016, but they've had deadly heat waves, but they are also very married to the look of their city, the citizens of Paris. So he talks about a very innovative mayor. He talks about the changes that they've made for like no cars in the center. But what are they going to do about their buildings? People die in these non-heated Paris garrets under zinc roofs. And like, you want to have an open comment period process for communities to talk about how they're going to save themselves. But you also need to change things. So if everyone says, no, I like it the way it is, but people are dying because of the zinc roofs, something has to give, right? And so it's just going to be money, money, money. And how do we prioritize? So, oh my gosh, such a good book. Jeff Goodell, I sought him out on Twitter and said, oh my God, this is so good. 5 stars. So moving on, let me check in with the chat. We're catching up with fall treats. Anita said, I had Thanksgiving dinner here in Canada. Awesome. Does that count as a fall treat? I don't know. Are there traditional Canadian Thanksgiving foods like we have for US Thanksgiving? Anita says, bought myself some caramel crunch donuts. Oh, I like apple caramel popovers, caramel crunch donuts. I like the caramel fall theme. Maggie agrees. That counts. It's definitely fallish. Maggie says he should do one about how many more people are dying during the increasingly violent winter storms called Cold Will Kill You Faster. Well, that's another effect. He's focused on one effect of the climate crisis. So that may be another book, Maggie. Then the weather will kill you because climate change is more than just warming, and that bias makes people unprepared for things like the Texas ice storm. He covers the Texas ice storm like in a little bit, but again, the focus of the book is heat because people's perceptions of heat is that it's not as dangerous, and he says in many examples that it really, really is in many, many places. So I just appreciated that viewpoint. And then she says, I'll have to read this because it sounds exactly like a book I read in 2003. Can't remember the name, but it all sounds very specifically familiar in details and names of cities. I'd be very curious. Yeah. Paget says, that sounds crazy good. Yay. And Leslie just came in. Hello, hello. Oh, The Heat is On from 97. Well, they've got to have different examples because a lot of his examples started in 99 and later. And so I can remember all of them as an adult. So I'd be very curious to compare. So cool. Oh my gosh. Okay. So next, switching gears a lot. Leslie, you're glad you made it in time for this. Where's my overlay? Ta-da! A new release that's not nonfiction. The Burnout by Sophie Kinsella, read by Bessie Carter, is new by one day. It was just released yesterday. So I got an advanced listening copy from our good friends at Libro.fm. We love Libro.fm for independent audiobook options. And this is a Sophie Kinsella book, which means that it's a romantic comedy. And you may know the Sophie Kinsella books from the Shopaholic series. I never really thought that was my vibe, so I have never read one before. And this is my first, and I'm so glad that Libro gave me the opportunity because I loved it. 5 stars. And I will not do spoilers for this. I'll talk very carefully about it. So, number 1, on Libro, Bessie Carter was an excellent narrator. She has accents for Devon. She has accents for London. She has emotional range for both like pity party interior monologue as well as snarky humor said out loud. You can definitely differentiate between the characters, I should say among the characters. So I thought the narration was excellent and definitely recommend that format. Now, even if you don't get the audio format, I thought that the voice of the female main character, even on a page, was like pitch perfect. So I'm sorry to those of you who do not have internal monologues, but there's a lot of fiction that has internal monologues. So I think the crossover between people who do, which is a minority of the population I just read, which surprised me, and writers. So like, what do people without internal monologues think when they read people thinking to themselves. Is it weird? I don't know. But this character, Sasha, which is a great name, just has the most relatable internal dialogue ever. And, you know, no spoiler, the burnout is about Sasha, who's a marketing director who has burnout. So she gets sent to a Devon beachside resort for a wellness break to try to recover herself and her feeling of herself, basically, when her life grinds to a halt. And, you know, it's a romantic comedy, so there's the usual suspects, I'll say, a meet cute and all that stuff. And the humor is spot on. It's not a spoiler to say I was walking on the street laughing, listening to this, and a mangle. There was just like really funny lines that she just delivers really well. Yes, it's hilarious. I found both the internal monologue, the dialogue, snark, and like just the action and the little details just made it. I loved it. I will also note that I noticed as I was reading deliberate signposting of mental health indicators. So what I mean by that is it's about someone who's in a phase of burnout. And so she was checking in with herself saying, physically, I feel this, and not in a textbook way, but like showing you the physical signs of burnout, showing you the mental signs of burnout, showing you the emotional roller coaster signs of burnout. And I thought that was really helpful. I don't think many people read about this as like a medical thing, but it does affect your body. It does manifest. And so in this very teasing, snarky, hilarious, relatable way, Sophie Kinsella is letting us know, hey, maybe you felt this. This is what it is. You should do something about that, because if you get to where a character is, you're in trouble. So I really liked that approach and appreciated that. And like I said, no spoilers, but I did not know how it would end. It's a romantic comedy, but was it romance or is it women's fiction? Is it romance or is it women's fiction? I won't spoil it for you, but I was happy with the ending, and that's all I'll say. So 5 stars yet again. So we're leading with some really great books here. Let's see. Okay, so Maggie's checking in about books she read 20 years ago. That's cool. Then we've got Sounds Adorable. And I like that the author shares that people are self-unaware of it until they're already to the point of no return. Yes. Is it on a non-ACX platform? ACX is what indies use to make audiobooks, right? So I believe it will be available everywhere. Libro is it's the producer side and the consumer side. So when you say non-ACX, I don't know what you're looking for, but it's available in hardcover and paperback and audio wherever books are sold. Sophie Kinsella is a huge author, so pick your format, pick your poison. So yeah, so that was the second great read today that we're discussing. And oh, it's not a banner, it's an overlay. That's why I can't find it. So this is where I stop and remind, if you're here and you're new, subscribe or leave a like on the stream, much appreciated. I've got 4 more books to go. The next one is a new purchase. So I know you don't need to hear about me buying books because I'm constantly saying that I need to get rid of them. But the other day, I did a really long walk and I was really proud of myself. And I walked into the bookstore and I saw this shiny thing and I was like, it's too pretty. I've been meaning to read this author for a long time. This book for a long time. I'm going to get it. I'm just going to get it. So even though it was a hardcover price, I did end up walking out my independent bookstore with this book. And here's the fun part. Oh, I'm trying not to knock over anything when I do this. This is The Living Mountain by Nan Shepherd. It has an introduction by Robert McFarlane, Be Still My Heart, and an afterword by Jeanette Winterson, who I know of, but I have not read yet. So already like an all-star cast here. It's a nonfiction that is a very short book about basically Nan Shepherd's nature memoir. She was a writer who was very successful in the 40s, 30s, and wrote this book in the late years of World War II. And then asked a buddy, a dude, author friend, do you think this has a chance? He mentioned one publishing house. She sent it to them. They said no, and she just put it in the drawer. 30 years later, 1977, we've got, we've got In Patagonia by Bruce Chatwin. We've got A Time of Gifts by Patrick Lee Firmer. We've got The Snow Leopard. So we have all these outdoor sort of suspenseful, living with nature suspense classics that we think of now. And so she was able to publish it. She got it out, dusted it off, and published this book. And it's, how would I describe this? She's Scottish. She had only lived in Scotland. She lived right near this mountain mass called the Cairngorms in northeast Scotland in the Highlands. And grew up there, ran around the hills, eventually fell in love with the mountain, went up a lot, learned to camp, was there at night, walked barefoot, like really developed a deep relationship with her environment, with the landscape. And I don't know if you would call it mountaineering per se, because there's no like pickaxes and stuff, but it is a very wintry landscape. There would be snow and ice in this mountain range or mountain mass well into the summer. It's one of these plateaus that has its own weather, right? So she really got a feel for it. And in this memoir, kind of like the climate journalism, she goes through different layers of knowing a mountain landscape. And it was really deep and sort of suspending of reality. So let me look at my notes again, because I'm kind of going to get lost in it if I jump in again. I like Robert McFarlane, who writes the introduction here, because he wrote The Old Ways. That's one of my favorite 5-star books ever. And that is about routes that people over the hundreds of years of human history have walked and made in the landscape. So there's some in Britain, but some around the world that he covers. And I just find it so interesting to talk about how human culture and tradition and myth-making actually make an impact on the landscape. Obviously now with technology, with mass agriculture, with blowing up mountaintops, we make a different impact on the landscape. But the old way of doing it was through repetition, like water on rock. And so I really like his take. He goes into a lot of detail, basically like previews every chapter, which I wasn't a huge fan of. But then it just made me recognize a lot of the places that I read when I read the book, because it was so short. And I really like the style. So I've got 2 places that I thought it would be really neat to read excerpts from to see if this would be your kind of book, if you're curious. So when I said she goes into the different layers, let me see if they give me, no, they don't give me a table of contents. But basically she starts with like geology, the rock, and growing up, and the weather and the water and the wind and the snow and the ice, like different things that are associated with the Cairngorms, and finishes with the life that's on it, which is like human life when it's on there, but also animals, insects, midges, and like how it all interacts, like on a conscious level and an unconscious level, which is cool by the end. So she's talking about her senses in this chapter, how she perceives it. And so this is page 101 of The Living Mountain. How can I number the worlds to which the eye gives me entry? The world of light, of color, of shape, of shadow, of mathematical precision in the snowflake, the ice formation, the quartz crystal, the patterns of stamen and petal, of rhythm in the fluid curve and plunging line of the mountain faces, Why some blocks of stone, hacked into violent and tortured shapes, should so profoundly tranquilize the mind, I do not know. Perhaps the eye imposes its own rhythm on what is only a confusion. One has to look creatively to see this mass of rock as more than jag and pinnacle, as beauty. Else, why did men for so many centuries think mountains repulsive? A certain kind of consciousness interacts with the mountain forms to create this sense of beauty. Just her meditations on sense and perception, and oh, it's really cool. But now I need a drink. Oh, it's a good cup of tea. That is a good cup of tea. Okay. There's one other piece on 103 just after that that's talking about walking barefoot. How do you manage to walk barefoot? It seems like incredible, right? And walking on heather, which is like juniper bushes, I guess would be the closest thing common in a US city. But actually walking barefoot upon heather is not so grim as it sounds. I have covered odd miles myself here and there in this fashion. It begins with a burn, just like a stream, that must be forded. Once my shoes are off, I am loath to put them on again. If there are grassy flats beside my burn, I walk on over them, rejoicing in the feel of the grass to my feet. And when the grass gives place to heather, I walk on still. By setting the foot sideways to the growth of the heather and pressing the sprays down, one can walk easily enough. Dried mud flats, sun-warmed, have a delicious touch, cushioned and smooth. So has long grass at morning, hot in the sun, but still cool and wet when the foot sinks into it, like food melting to a new flavor in the mouth. And a flower caught by the stalk between the toes is a small enchantment. This is what we need to be teaching in the schools. This method of interacting with the environment, of engaging, of like healthy body positivity. This is how our bodies feel the world. Oh, I love it. Okay, so that is the living mountain. And bonus, it mentions, oh, did I write down where? Maybe not. Maybe not. Oh, shoot, I didn't. Anyway, this book is about the Cairngorms, which is massive mountains in northeast Scotland near Aviemore. Aviemore is known for skiing holidays. And you know what else it's known for? This lady, who I read all during September for Scottember, and I only finished half of her memoir, which is in 2 volumes. Memoirs of a Highland Lady by Elizabeth Grant of Rothiemurchus. Rothiemurchus is right next to Aviemore. She names Aviemore in her book. And so when she's talking about human effects on the landscape, she talks about how 100 years ago, when this lady was living in 1840s or earlier, the humans had made, they were cutting down trees for timber, and they would do it up in the heights, and they would roll them down streams, and they'd have sluices. So they'd hold them, let the water through to make it enough water to roll the big trees downstream. And those leave marks you can still see, at least you could in 1940. So how cool is that? The books are talking to each other. So I loved it. I love that part. Brian of Bookish had a word for that, and now I forget. It was something with Saria. I think there needs to be sapio in there. But anyway, that was really fun. Oh, so we're 3 books in. Maggie says it is very pretty. Thank you. And Maggie read it when she was 18 in the early 80s. It added the Cairngorms to her bucket list, despite knowing about the Cairngorm Plateau disaster. I don't know that as a named disaster. Is that a plane crash, or is that like a hiking death? I don't know what a disaster that is. Leslie says, yes. Burnout and I are tumultuous bedfellows. That hardcover copy is beautiful. Thank you. Yay. Okay, so 3 in. I think I covered everything. Yes, for the Living Mountain. So next up, we have A Fellow Writer's Book, which is another overlay. So I have covered all the formats. I don't know if you've noticed, but we've got hardcover, we've got paperback to come, we've got library book, we've got Libro.fm, and this is only available as an Amazon ebook or paperback. So Amazon. This is Write, Eat, Sleep, Repeat. 30 Days, 50,000 Words, How to Win NaNoWriMo by Emma Bennett. And got an advanced copy of this so that I could leave a fun review. So this is definitely a book for beginners, for people who are bewildered by Nano and need like a grounding order of operations. It's a very no-nonsense approach to tackling a novel in November. So if anyone doesn't know, I can't imagine someone on my channel who doesn't know what NaNoWriMo is, but that would be the book for you because National Novel Writing Month, November, comes around every year and we get all crazy and try to write 50,000 words, which is like the minimum for a novel, as a first draft, or any draft really, but when you're writing that fast, you tend to want to do a first draft, so it doesn't matter if it's crappy. And you log in on this website and put in your words, and you have a community of other people who are doing the same crazy thing. And by the end, you've all managed to drag yourself across the finish line, or maybe you haven't, but this book will help you get there. So what I really liked about it was that Emma is giving her personal experience. So you've got lots of great tips as to how to organize your preparations, how to organize your routine, how to like optimize all your spaces, your preparation, your timings, like your asking for help, your family members that may want to chime in, all that stuff. And then she also notes markers when there are like what I call your mileage may vary points, meaning this is what happened to her, and this is probably going to be different for you. So she had like places where she needed to travel, and so she did this for it. Or she had, in some cases, a different deadline, so she needed to start later, but this is what she would recommend if she hadn't had to do that. So I really liked those like specific recommendations. It's really in the style of a how-to book. Like if you're wanting to run a marathon, these are the steps you take. It's really well broken down into stages and different aspects of the challenge. So like if you're going to start a business, you have to go through these steps. If you're going to run a marathon, you have to go through these steps, more or less. So for NaNoWriMo, basically you do, if you want to win, have to prepare in a certain way. And this is a great summary of the things that you should take into consideration and be prepared for. So write, eat, sleep, repeat. And I did like the snacky things that she included here. I also loved the conclusion, which is the results of her experiment. So that was really fun. She talked about her own results, and of course it's the voice of our friend lovely Emma, and so that just made it all the more fun to hear it in my head. So that was lovely. And it is Preptober right now, and if you've read this book, you know Preptober is October. You prepare for Nano. And so she's got stuff going on for that right now, as well as I'm sure content planned for Nano to be timed with the release of this wonderful book. So definitely recommended for newbies at Nano. And that's 4 books in. Oh, okay. So Maggie is telling me a hiking death disaster. Several students got trapped at the mountain and many died. Ah, okay. I think that's the one where the teacher was with them, but only managed to save like one student. Yeah, there's not much you can do with like hypothermia, right? Hyper is heat, hypo is cold. Yeah. Okay, book 5. We're almost there. Guys. So book 5, we're going down here. Patricia Wentworth, The Chinese Shawl, library book. So this is book 5 in the series, but it's very loosely a book 5 because they're standalone readable. And I forgot, but I was attracted to this cover, and there's a good reason. I've been attracted to this cover before because these, what is it? Open Road editions of the classic series I've read before. So I've read a different book, but I picked this one up, and I think I like this one better. So it's the Miss Silver Mysteries, and if you like, Phryne Fisher, that's kind of what this is. It's an upper class. Actually, here's the thing that's unusual about it. So Agatha Christie-ish, right? But Agatha Christie's 20s, 30s. And Patricia Wentworth is writing this is published in 1943. So a little different. It's got a lighthearted vibe in that, yes, people are murdered, but it's not like suspenseful, chilling, like horror in any way, right? In any way. But it's also not syrupy personal relationships, small townish of a cozy mystery, because this is before those were really a thing. It's got some moments of emotional truth for our main character. Here's the unusual thing. Sorry, I'm saying it now. The female main character is not the sleuth. The sleuth comes on like halfway through, and we've already got the main character's backstory and dilemma and all this stuff. And we meet Miss Silver, the sleuth, like halfway through. She's another guest in the country house. So it's a sort of, closed house, sealed room, locked room, I guess. Mystery, but not very strictly speaking, of this country house that has a murder happen, and you're trying to deduce who the culprit was. Like I said, there's some emotional truth moments for our main character, as well as a love interest. So that was nice, a little spice in the mix. And also delicious, snarky prose for the main character and others. I shared some of this when I was reading this for the fireside chat a couple weeks ago. It was making me laugh out loud and like make funny faces because, it's from the 1940s, and there's some of that Charlie Brown's mother voice kind of talk in this, of like, maybe not Charlie Brown's mother, maybe more like, "Ma, say," like that kind of talk, and also like snark. So I enjoyed that thoroughly. That's what contributed to sort of a lighthearted vibe, because it's a little dated in the word choice, shall we say, but not in the structure or pace or suspense, which is all very well done. So I really enjoyed this. So yeah, another good one. And are we ready for the final one? It's another series. This is another library book, Marked in Flesh by Anne Bishop. So this is 2016, so we're a little behind. The last book in the series, the previous book that I read in the series, Vision in Silver, I had read and forgot, except for the ending. So I read that one, and when I reviewed it, I said it was a little slower. There were too many characters. We were in all their heads. We had to repeat the same action in different people's heads, which was weird. So it slowed it down for me. Marked in Flesh either does not do that, or I was too interested in like the climax of the series to pay it attention. So I read through this much faster. It was very much more pacey. The romance shenanigans are still the slowest burn ever, because this is book 4. And I think like we held a hand. So I don't know if that's a spoiler, but yeah. But the action was great. The political themes were great. The like threat and groups banding together and trying to save each other was great. Like the action and suspense stuff was really good. So I've only got one book left. I just checked the series of the others, and there are other books, but they're after sort of this storyline and these characters, as far as I can tell. So I think there's only one more called Etched in Bone, and it's already waiting for me at the library. So I was going to wait till I do this read through and then bring it back and pick up my next copy. I'm very excited. So yes. Maggie's giving us, there are a bunch of Patricia Wentworth books listed for 99 cents and $1.99 on Kindle, so you can snap them up if you are an e-reader. Yes, thank you. And then Leslie says, did someone twirl their mustache in Wentworth's books? I don't know about other books. I don't think there were any mustaches in this one. You know, mustaches are more of a Victorian and Edwardian feature. So this is firmly World War II. Mustaches were more out in terms of men's fashion. So I would say we're on safe ground for that as far as that goes. Self-pub with Andy popping in to say hi. And that like button was looking at me funny. I had to slap it hard. Well, you know, there's some of that going on in this book, sci-fi fantasy. So yeah, like sci-fi fantasy, classic mystery, golden age mystery, nonfiction nature memoir, nonfiction climate science, romantic comedy new release, and nonfiction nano inspiration / business. That is like the gamut. So that is quite a wrap up. I just wanted to say, I feel like I've got every genre, I've got every format, I've got every like has been on my shelf for a long time versus new versus library. So that's just like a good snapshot of my channel right there. Very fun. So that is basically what I have for you today, and that's wrapping it up pretty good. I'll just remind you, we've got The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern for the Patreon book club. That is coming up in a couple weeks, so I haven't started it yet. I've been told by so many people I need to read this, so I am excited, but also a little worried about the hype. Hopefully that'll work out. If you're curious and want to join and jump in for a spooky October read, the link is in the chat. It's a little shortened bit.ly link for convenience. And again, reminder that we've got Fireside Chat with Sheraton and RC this Friday. That'll be 5 p.m. Pacific. And then I've got omnibus recommendations for November coming up on Sunday. And just lots of stuff going on. So yeah, that's all I have today. I love that there were so many lovely stream hoppers. I really appreciate that. Bugsy Siegel. That's 20s and 30s, right? Maybe it was written in the 40s. Does he have a mustache? Yeah, I guess he does. Maggie says, you're a genre slut like me. When Eva gets the mugs back up, you need one. I don't know. I like my mug. It's a rainbow mug. And when it rains, look for rainbows. I like this one. So yeah. So go forth, make some fall treats, treat yourself, maybe with a book, maybe with a baked good, or maybe just relax and self-care so you don't burn out. That's how we're bringing this full circle. There we go, folks. All right. Thanks, everybody. It is the middle of the week, so good luck with the rest of the week's responsibilities. Take care of yourselves. Happy reading. I will see you again soon.